And welcome to our webinar today. Core Associates and AvidXchange have teamed up to bring you an unprecedented purchase-to-pay experience, especially for Sage 300 CRE users. This newly connected end-to-end solution is called Core plus AvidXchange Pay. So that's what we plan to talk to you about today. We wanted to thank you for joining. You'll learn about completely automating the process from beginning to end. Think PO to invoice routing and approval, all the way to executing your payments and tracking that information back into your Sage ERP. Core Associates and AvidXchange have streamlined this entire process for you. So I'm Carolyn Hoffner here at AvidXchange, and I'm going to introduce our three main speakers for today. So first we've got Mike Carvino with Core Associates. He's got over 30 years of experience in software, primarily focused on the construction industry. So Mike's worked across all disciplines of software organizations. He's created and managed a help desk, installed software, implemented systems, and served as a consultant and training director. He later began a sales career that included both internal and external sales before forming his own consulting agency. Mike joined Core Associates in 2013 and is the VP of Sales and Marketing. So after Mike, you're going to hear from Jim Campbell. He's the VP of Construction Sales at AvidXchange. He's a 40-year veteran of the construction industry. Jim began his career at Timberline Software Corporation in 1979 and continued his 26-year tenure there after the company's acquisition by Sage. Immediately following, he led a construction consulting company as its president for 5 years until the company was acquired by Viewpoint Construction Software, where he served as the channel sales manager for North America. Jim's led the construction strategy here at AvidXchange since 2016. And then our final main speaker here is Michelle Retzbach, our solutions consultant at AvidXchange. Michelle specializes in helping companies streamline accounts payable operations and create efficiencies through automation and best practices. Her expertise is in the construction and real estate industries. She first joined AvidXchange in 2016 as a project manager on the customer onboarding team, where she spent 2 years implementing clients before transitioning to a solutions consultant role.
Great. All right. Thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate it. So today what we're going to talk about first is why automate your AP process. And I would suspect that based on some of the poll questions, you probably already know why. We'll look at core cloud systems and Tymber Scan, and then we will transition from there into the B2B payment landscape and benefits of payment automation. And we'll take a look at Create a Check and AvidXchange Pay. So with that, let's talk about the time and cost associated with a manual AP process. You know, one of the things that's interesting, because the poll question really kind of speaks to one of the things that I typically do when I visit with a client that is interested in trying to get that AP process under control. One of the first things I will ask is, what does your current process look like? And I would suspect that in many cases, I would say most of the companies that I meet with, they're usually on the it's a nightmare to we don't have a process. So this is an interesting poll question that I think will lead to some, hopefully allow you to see a solution that will get this process under control. Challenges you may be currently facing. Intaking invoices, not standard across suppliers, received in a huge variety of formats, trying to capture the data that's non-standard. Matching the invoices with the purchase orders and receivers, the approval process, which can typically be slow and time-consuming, and also the reporting process, not knowing where things are at any given time, trying to manage the payments once that process is done. So those challenges are typical of an AP department. Linked directly to everyday issues that AP staff face, processing, handling payments, managing cash. According to market research, companies lose 20 to 30% in revenue every year due to inefficiencies. And one of the things that we've done with Tymber Scan and with the process that we've created, not only through Core Associates but also through AvidXchange, is we've created those efficiencies. We've allowed for the client to eliminate a lot of the manual processes, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Costs associated with your AP process. And there are two sides to the equation that are impacted, both the accounts payable process, the buyer, and the supplier. So how much time and resources are required throughout this process to be able to get from the point of perhaps manually exchanging purchase orders and invoices, receiving, entering, routing, coding, approving invoices, making payments, and reconciling. This all takes time. And along the way, anything that's done manually just continues to slow that process dramatically. So again, according to industry research, all-inclusive cost to process a single invoice, $11.57. The payment is $7.78. So if we break that down, it's nearly $20 per invoice and payment processed. We took that and we cut that in half or more. Think about the efficiencies that we can create. Okay, so a new way of thinking about the entire AP workflow process, and this is what we're going to talk about for a few minutes today. We have the option, obviously, of invoices and how they come into your office first. So are they coming in by way of paper, or can we eliminate the paper by perhaps having them come in by way of email, some sort of a digital record? Capturing the data. Do we have to manually enter the data, or can we automatically extract information using tools like optical character recognition? Matching the information. Invoices and POs being matched automatically as opposed to manually. Approvals. How can we automate the workflows and make it simple and easy for people to be able to get the invoices in a timely manner and get them approved? The reporting process. How quickly can we get information to people so that they're able to see it and be able to report on it? And also the payment process. Instead of being costly and labor intensive, we try to make it electronic and automatic. So the end-to-end joint solution works like this. It starts with creating that purchase order. So the purchase order gets created either in your system, your ERP application, or in core cloud systems. The invoices are managed typically through Tymber scan, and that's what we'll be talking about, the acquiring, coding, routing, and approving of the invoices. And then the invoices get passed to your ERP system. Primarily what we're going to be focusing on today would be Sage 300 CRE. And then once that process is done and the invoices have been completed and your financials have been updated, and then you're processing your payments, then we'll take a look at how the AvidXchange pay process will work to eliminate paper all along the way. Core Associates, just to give you kind of a sense, we've been around since 2004. We have over 2,000 clients and over 30,000 users of our application. What we've done is we've perfected that workflow process. We've taken the end-to-end purchase-to-pay process in conjunction with what we're doing with AvidXchange and eliminated the manual process and eliminated the paper all along the way. This is kind of a big picture overview of what TymberScan looks like. What TymberScan started as was simply an AP routing and approval system, but it has grown dramatically since then to include not only that more of a kind of, I would call it a server-based workflow automation system, to include a number of of cloud-based solutions that work and fit and associate with TymberScan, and everything integrated directly with Sage 300 CRE. Okay, so here I want to take you through a process where when an invoice arrives at your door, how do we get that invoice into TymberScan? Once it's in TymberScan, how do we go about coding and processing the invoice? How does the approval process work? What does it look like once the invoice has been approved and it's been passed to Sage 300? And then what does the payment look like on the back end? So my workflow process will start at the point where an invoice arrives at your door. and take us through this entire workflow scenario. With that, I've already logged into TymberScan. So basically, to do that, it's simply selecting an icon on your desktop like you see here. Takes you through your security credentials to a screen that may typically look like this. If I wanted to, I can also look at information in a dashboard. So I can quickly isolate as I've logged into the system to see what invoices I need to take action on, or perhaps someone else needs to take action on. So again, as I mentioned, what I want to do is kind of take us briefly through a workflow process, starting at the point where an invoice arrives at your door. And I'm going to do this actually in 3 different steps, because I want to start with the basics, and then we're going to talk about how we can eliminate the paper and eliminate and automate the process even further. So when an invoice arrives at your door, to get it into TymberScan, you choose the acquire function, and then you choose the option acquire images, and it opens up this viewer. There are several ways to go about acquiring invoices or documents into the system. One simple way is you can simply drag and drop a document, as I'm doing here. And I've now just acquired that particular document in the system. I can size it with the wheel of my mouse or use my annotation tools if I want. And then if I needed to split the documents, I can simply right-click and I can separate the documents as I need to. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm starting with this acquire process, which gives me the option to visibly look at the documents first, and then what I'm going to do is assign them. So what I would do at this point is assign them to someone in data entry who will take the invoice and will start entering them in TymberScan. That's where we'll go next. Basically, when you're entering invoices in TymberScan, what we've done is we have taken the AP entry process from Sage 300 and we pulled it back into TymberScan. So from the perspective of someone who is just initially learning TymberScan, they don't have to learn a new AP entry process. Everything in TymberScan, all of these fields are laid out in the exact same order, and they function the exact same way as they would in Sage 300. So what you're seeing is the invoice entry screen with the image in full view in front of me here, with the data entry grid down here at the bottom. And I can always move this data entry grid. If I want to just shift this out of the way, I can do so. So that way I can have the image in full view on one side, and I can just line up this data entry grid and make this as large or small as I need to on the other. Okay, so I'm not going to go through a full entry of an invoice. Just want to talk about a few items here. Basically, as I mentioned, again, speaking to the integration with Sage, if I don't know the vendor code, I can go search for the vendors. This is searching the Sage vendor master file, and I can sort by vendor number, name, or address. When I put in key search letters, I can go find power equipment rental. If you're using the compliance portion of Sage 300, you will get compliance warnings here just like you would in Sage. When I plug in the invoice number, if it's a duplicate invoice, it stops you immediately. So again, speaking to that integration, we know immediately that we have a duplicate invoice. Now here's where I think TymberScan starts to really demonstrate its power. Let's say that I'm looking at the invoice and I can't recall when I processed invoice 24011 previously. What I could do is I can simply go to the history and I'm able to see a list of all of the invoices for this vendor, regardless of their status. So this is taking invoices that have already been completely processed and posted, and we may have cut checks against them. And it's also combining them with invoices that could be in the routing and approval process. It's laid out like an Excel spreadsheet. So if I want to sort by any of the columns, I can do so, or group. But what I want to do is just find that duplicate invoice. So right here, I can see when that invoice was processed initially. When I click on the detail button, I can see how the invoice was coded. What I can also do is if I hover the mouse on any of these key fields, like the commitment, the job, the cost code, it brings up a tooltip that provides me with additional information. So it's pulling this data right from Sage, and it's displaying it right on the screen. I can see the original committed amount, any change orders, what has been paid, what's been invoiced in the balance. I can hover the mouse on the job and see the revised contract amount of the job, and I can hover the mouse on the cost code, and I can see what we've invoiced against this cost code. Now, in addition to that detail, What I could also do is I could call up the original invoice image. I can see that someone put a sticky note on the invoice. I see all of the supporting documents behind the invoice. And then we also have an audit log for every single invoice, so you know exactly what happened, when it happened, and who did what. Now, all this information was available to me, and I never left the invoice entry screen. So if I circle back here, I can simply come in here. I'll just plug in some more data, and we'll continue on down through the distribution. Basically, what I wanted to get to is a point where whether I'm processing an invoice against a commitment or simply to a job or maybe directly to a GL account, regardless of how I'm coding that invoice. At this point, what I can do is accept the invoice, and TymberScan will route the invoice off to the approvers. How it gets to the approvers is based on the business rules that you design. So one of the first things that you do when you implement TymberScan is you establish the business rules. They're meant to reflect how you route invoices today, only what we're going to do is we're going to eliminate having them being routed manually or by way of email, for example, and we're going to build business rules to route them electronically through TymberScan. So I just wanted to give you a brief overview. There are a lot of other things that we could cover here in the invoice entry screen, but I want to take a step back for a moment. So let's say that instead of me having to manually acquire the invoice and manually code the invoice, what if we could eliminate those steps? Well, we can. So basically what TymberScan has is they have an email monitoring program. What the email monitoring program can do is it can acquire the invoices automatically as they're coming into an email address. So if you have a designated AP email address, TymberScan can monitor that address. It will look at the attachment. It will take the attachment and it can pull it out. Then it can do one of two things. It can either drop that attachment into a file, which you can then retrieve here in the acquire screen, or it could actually go one step further. It can acquire the invoice and bypass the entire acquire step and place it directly into the data entry queue for you. Now, let me go one step further. So what we've talked about is we've taken an invoice that came in by way of email. Instead of anyone having to go through and manually monitor the email address and manually pull that invoice into TymberScan, TymberScan did all of that for you. What it can also do is when it assigns it to the person in data entry, it can also invoke what's called TymberScan Capture, which is our optical character recognition component of TymberScan. So when I go into invoice entry, instead of me having to call up this invoice for power equipment rental and key in all the data, what I can do if I go to the next invoice, which is the one for HD Supply, what it did is it acquired the invoice automatically. It read the invoice and it used TymberScan Capture to OCR the document, and it read all of this information automatically. So I've now eliminated the steps of having to manually put those invoices when they came in onto a scanning device. I've eliminated the step of having to manually acquire the invoices, and I've eliminated the step of having to manually code the invoice. All done automatically. I can simply accept the invoice at this point, or if I needed to make a change, I can do so anywhere along the way. So if I needed to modify the dollar amount or the coding or what have you, I can do so. Okay, let's take a step back again. Now, with respect to AvidXchange, one of the things that we have done is we have, there are clients who might desire to have AvidXchange actually enter their invoices initially. That can still be done. So what could potentially happen is you could have your invoices processed by Avid, and then what TymberScan does is it watches those invoices after they get processed by AvidXchange, and it will acquire them similar to like it would do for an emailed invoice. And it acquires it directly into the invoice entry queue again, and it will pull up the data with all of the coding information already associated with the invoice. So if we take a specific invoice, I'll take, for example, we'll take Gray Bar. And let's say that the Gray Bar invoice was one that was coded in Avid originally. We'll use Gresham here. It pulls up the information. Everything that's already been coded on that invoice is processed here. So the vendor code, now in this case, we don't happen to have that vendor. So even though it will accept the invoice, we know that we have a vendor code that we still need to set up. So we would go about doing that. But you see how it has already coded all of the information that it received from AvidXchange. And again, it's the same concept as the OCR component, where we've basically retrieved all of the information from the AvidXchange portal, and we have pre-coded the invoice when it gets to Tymber Scan. All it needs to do now is go on to its routing and approval process. Okay, I'm going to step back one more time, because we started out talking about the whole purchase to pay concept. So what Tymber Scan also allows you to do is we have a purchasing application. So in our core cloud systems solution, what I could potentially do, and let me go back here to field purchasing, is I could create a purchase order. I could do this on the fly. I could be filling out the information, but what's nice about the way that the mobile purchasing solution works is that with Core Cloud, this can be done in any mobile environment. So I don't have to be sitting at my desktop to fill this out. I could actually be working, on my mobile phone, for example. I'm filling out the information. As I go and search for info such as the job, it's searching the job file just like it would in Tymber Scan. I'm filling out the information. I go through the process. I maybe attach a copy or a picture of a quote that I have. If I need to sign it, I go ahead and do so. And then once I go ahead and submit that particular purchase order, what I'm also able to do is I could potentially attach receiving tickets to the purchase order. But ultimately, once I've processed that PO in Core Cloud, it sends that data over to Tymber Scan automatically as well. So now once we get to Tymber Scan, once again, automatically acquired into the system, automatically coded. Let me back up one second. And it's going to take the purchase order that I set up for Ace Drywall. And it pre-coded all the information based on what came in from the purchase order. So now in this case, it brought in the invoice. Invoice was automatically acquired. It was pre-coded, and it then pulled in all of the commitment information and all of the supporting documents. The purchase order, receiver, and everything associated with that invoice are all aligned for me automatically based on the fact that I created that purchase order and the receiver attached to it in the field. That's how simple and easy it is. Once I've gone ahead and accepted the invoice and passed it on, let's take a moment and look at the approval process. So let's say that we've gone ahead and done so. But before I get to the approval, one of the things that we also talked about is this whole concept of once invoices get routed to the approvers, we have no idea where they are or when we're going to get them back. So we talked about the dashboard, which gives you kind of a 20,000-foot view. We also have a whole series of reports and inquiries. What's nice about the reports is that you can drill down. So if I wanted to, I can just look on the front end here. I can see the number of invoices that I have outstanding. But if I want to drill further in, now I can start to locate where they are. And if I want to focus in on Robert Jones, I can see that obviously he must have quit the company or what have you, because he's had these invoices routed to him for a long time. But you can get the idea that you can see and get a sense for where anything is at any given time. We provide analytics. You can see how quickly invoices get turned around. So we have all that information available. One other note about the inquiries, we also can compile backup to support a T&M or cost plus billing or for a loan draw. So if I go into the job cost inquiry, I could do this for a specific date range. I'll say all dates for right now. But what I could potentially do here is come in, I could say I want to pull up everything for this particular job. And now I've just gone through and compiled basically what looks like an Excel spreadsheet. I can say which rows or columns I want to include or exclude. But what I have is I have all of those AP invoices sitting over here. And if I click on the report menu, I can download those images. So within a matter of seconds, I can compile that supporting document package that I wanted to be able to use for a T&M or cost plus billing. Okay, so let's just go ahead and wrap up this part of the presentation very briefly. I'll talk about the approval process. That's typically done through what we call Tymber Scan Go. Again, it's a mobile solution. So the approvers, again, don't have to be logged into a desktop application. They can do this using a web browser. They can use this on their phone if they want, or on an iPad. And all they have to do is they call up their particular invoices that are routed to them. And then once they select them, if they want to go ahead and actually dig further into the invoice, they can see notes that have been associated with it. They can approve it. They can reject it. They can put it on hold. If they wanted to see how it's been coded so far, they can call this information up. If they wanted to edit that, they simply select it. We still provide the tooltips even here in the web browser. So if I wanted to see, for example, what information is associated with the job or the cost code or any of that, I can do so. I can select new jobs. I can code. This is all based on how you set up your approvers and what you want them to have access to. If you want them to be able to code, they can. If you don't, they won't. But basically, again, using any type of mobile device, so if I slide this over here, and I apologize for all this gobbledygook on the right-hand side, but again, I could be using this on an iPad. I could make this even smaller, and it's now, I'm working on a mobile phone, and I have the control buttons at the bottom and top that I'm able to go through and do everything that I need to do to approve, reject, put the invoice on hold, email, or print the invoice if I need to. And print's kind of a nasty word. We don't want to do that at all if we don't have to. Okay, so once the invoices get approved, and I'm only going to take a couple more minutes on this portion of the presentation, but once the approval process is done, basically what happens is the invoices, typically in many cases, a lot of clients will deploy this final review step so that the invoices can be reviewed by usually someone in accounting that takes the one final look at the invoices. After that, they get passed automatically to Sage 300, and the only thing left is they have to be posted in Sage 300. Okay, so now let's say they've gotten posted and you've decided you wanted to do a payment process. If you're using Create a Check, Tymber Scan allows you to be able to take those invoices and you can simply attach from the Piracle file, you can attach a copy of the check image. So it allows me to simply pull it right from the Create a Check file. And then what I would do is I can attach, and I'll show you basically behind the scenes what it looks like. So what it's doing is it's going through from the Create a Check file. It's looking at each of those payment stubs, if you will, and it will attach each check image to each invoice that check pays. If this check paid 5 invoices, it would attach that same image to all 5 invoices. What that then allows you to do is, I could be inside Sage 300, and if I wanted to go to do an inquiry and maybe look at my power equipment rental vendor, look at the invoices, and maybe scroll down to invoice 24011, when I click on the paperclip, I'm able to see a package that shows me not only the invoice, but all of the supporting documents all the way down to the check image. So again, what I've done is I've demonstrated how we can take the purchase through the workflow automation of AP invoices, through the payment process, and not once did we ever touch the paper. Everything was completely efficient. We never had to use a piece of paper anywhere along the way. And now the checks have been paid and they've been attached to the invoices inside Sage 300. But I wanted to just kind of wrap up before I turn it over to Jim and talk about the partnership between Core Associates and AvidXchange. Why this is so important to Core Associates is we have always had the ability to do the purchase through the workflow automation process. But what we've never been able to do is automate the payment process. This is where the partnership with AvidXchange comes into play, and it's so valuable for us. Because now, as the two companies together, we can present a joint solution that allows for a client to do an entire purchase-to-pay solution completely efficiently, as you hopefully saw me demonstrate, without ever touching paper anywhere along the way. That's very, very powerful. That's where clients are going with their workflow automation process. And with this partnership, we've been able to complete that workflow process all the way through the payment steps. I will now turn it over to Jim.
Okay, Mike, thank you very much, and I appreciate that good overview to TymberScan and those kind words of welcome. Since our founding in the year 2000, AvidXchange's goal has been to transform the way companies pay their bills. Our headquarters is in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we're trusted by more than 5,500 clients throughout North America to entrust us with their AP automation. So just to kind of help you calibrate our outreach, we currently have over 500,000 subcontractors and suppliers enrolled in our supplier payment network. These are companies that we're consistently paying day in and day out. Last fiscal year, for example, we processed 9.5 million individual payments for a combined $120 billion of automated invoice and payment transactions through our platform across several industries. So AvidXchange is considered to be a financial technology company. And in fact, we rank among the top 10 largest fintech companies in the United States. Now, while we're not a bank, we do employ bank-level security measures and audit standards. Simply stated, we're moving a lot of money, and it's of our utmost importance to protect the integrity of both our clients and our services. So, as Mike said, our goal here, simply stated, is we're striving to improve the overall purchase-to-pay experience for our clients. We know that many of the Sage CRE customers have heavy committed cost needs, and the deep integration that TymberScan offers for committed cost, for job cost, for compliance that works within the hand-in-hand with the Sage CRE products is fantastic. And that's why we've chosen to partner with TymberScan on the invoice side with AvidXchange in bringing payment execution to the accounts payable cycle. So let's look now sort of at the payment landscape before we get into Avid Pay. Let's just look at what's going on from an industry perspective. So a recent Goldman Sachs business-to-business B2B payment report shows that 63% of the middle market B2B payments are still being made by manual checks. Probably no big surprise there. Many of you are probably still paying the majority of your bills by manual checks. But the trend we're seeing, however, is suppliers are preferring various types of electronic payment methods on their end, such as ACH or wires or P-cards or virtual cards as preferred over printed checks. So what's trending up, and the trend is continuing at a rapid pace, is the trend towards some type of electronic payments. So the question becomes, how do you know? How do you facilitate payment based on supplier preferences? Well, this is where the power of the B2B payment network is playing a huge role in driving the shift in the market. By a payment network knowing the supplier's real-time payment preferences, and this takes the pressure off of your accounts payable department by facilitating a single payment file, allowing you to facilitate a single payment file regardless of payment types. So let's look at a couple of the primary payment challenges that you probably have today. You may recognize many of these, and obviously these are areas that we think we can get you some quick wins. First of all, like we just mentioned, multiple payment types. By you having to manage the vendor's multiple payment types is quite a challenge across your vendor enrollment. collecting the data and then housing it in your accounting system. Once you've got the data, you got to maintain it. So what if a checking account changes for one of your vendors? And then oftentimes you have to segregate a separate payment process per the payment type. This is where many of the inefficiencies lies, and therefore it's really where the largest opportunity for both efficiency and productivity gains are found within payment automation. Being able to process a single payment file regardless of a vendor's preferred payment method is a huge area of productivity. Let's think about approvals, payment approvals. Many businesses do have a payment approval process before cash leaves the account. Today, most of those processes are manual. So think of a check, for example, that based on a dollar threshold may require 2 signatures. So most companies, you're still taking time, or employees are taking time burning shoe leather to track down managers and executives to collect dual signatures. Think about a world where you, instead of collecting dual signatures, you could actually accomplish this with the click of a button within a secure payment routing workflow procedure. What about reconciliation? What impact will a payments automation have on my reconciliations? A question that's often asked. Well, properly done, there should be some improvements in this area, as fewer items will be outstanding or uncleared. At AvidXchange, for example, we debit your operating account once per payment. So each payment has its own debit in your checking account, so you don't lose sight of the individual reconciliation items. Think about payment follow-up. In a full-service payment automation environment, your service provider should do the follow-up on any outstanding payments that have not cleared in a reasonable time frame. This could range from a credit card payment not being processed to a check not clearing. The payment partner should also be responsible for maintaining the checking account information for all of your ACH vendors and housing that in their secure system, protecting you from any type of breach and obtaining that type of supplier information out of your ERP. Lastly, audits and reports. Simply stated, a paper-intensive environment is likely the toughest environment for reporting. Today, you're likely issuing checks, you're likely taking a printed copy of the check or a printed stub of the check, stapling it to the invoice. Maybe those invoices get filed by job, perhaps by vendor. But regardless, in that paper method, draw reports or cost-plus billing substantiation and AP audits really become a time-consuming matter and quite cumbersome. So how does AP automation drive value for you? How do we change these things? Here's some areas to look for before Michelle gets right into her presentation, which will be next. And that is overall efficiencies. By helping eliminate paper checks and invoices, this simply reduces the need to manage vendor data and various payment types. It'll be your largest gain. Efficiency will be your largest gain in productivity by eliminating paper. You'll have visibility and real-time access into the payment status 24/7. You'll be able to see exactly where that payment stands for detailed tracking, any research or reconciliation. And the AvidXchange Payment Services team ensures that all your payments are processed in a timely manner. Thing to think about is scale. As your business grows, or if you have peak volumes during seasonal times, you can take advantage of the largest supplier network in the industry that's growing every day. Essentially, this will let you grow your revenues without increasing your overhead proportionately. Financial control. Maintain the same level of control for approval signatures we've talked about through an automated workflow as opposed to chasing people down for signatures. And lastly, this may be something new to think about, is thinking of accounts payable as a profit center. Where you see with each qualified transaction that's settled through some electronic payment method, your company will earn a financial rebate. It can be applied to reduce your transaction fees or can be paid out in the form of a cash rebate. In addition to productivity gains, the rebates themselves will often pay for the cost of these system automations. So with that, we'd like to transition now to Michelle to get into the Avid Pay system and show you a little bit about how it and Create a Check work together to bring payment efficiencies to your automation process.
So just a couple of things here that I want to start with in the deck, and then we'll jump right over to the product. So I like to start with this graphic, and thanks, Jim. That was a great intro and handoff, but I like to start with this graphic specifically because I think it does a nice job of giving you a visual to how things are flowing on the payment side of this process. So I want to preface it by saying you'll still have full control over selecting which payments you want to make and when you want to make them, just as Jim said, from your accounting system. And then once selected, instead of clicking print to send to your local printer in-house, that's where Create a Check would come in, and you would select that Create a Check printer instead. So Create a Check is going to be the program behind the scenes that's processing the data through whichever conduit you have selected from the three that you see here. So we either have that Avid Pay network, printing locally to blank check stock, or we can even help with those self-managed ACH and wire files that can be sent to your bank. So with Create a Check and Avid Pay together, we can truly handle 100% of your AP payments. Now with Create a Check, it is a secure application. So I like to at least show this from a software perspective so that you understand you are still having secure credentials to authorize which payment method you are sending those payments through. And then if you select the Avid Pay network, which is where we're focusing these last few minutes today, it will ask you once more to authenticate your credentials so the file can then be sent to the Avid Pay network for processing. So to reiterate that process and then add on also a little bit, I want to show just one more diagram so that I can take you through the high-level process. So again, everything's generated in the accounting system under your control. Once you send those payments, if you opt for the Avid Pay network, that's when the payment process begins. I think it's important to note that in this step here, where you see AvidXchange Pay Control, we do have an optional approval process that can be turned on for an internal approval within your organization for, one last review, one last quote unquote sign off of those checks before they're going out the door. Once that approval is made, that's when the funding begins. So we are going to do individual ACH debits from your issuing bank account or accounts and move those funds into a clearing account managed by Old North State Trust. You're made a member of this account via a joinder agreement, so you're always in control and ownership of your own funds. And then it's through that account that we then cut the payments off of to your suppliers and vendors in one of the three preferred payment methods, being a virtual card powered by MasterCard. APD stands for Avid Pay Direct, which is essentially a direct deposit, but it is enhanced along with rich remittance detail presented to the vendor or supplier. And then an Avid Pay check is simply a paper check, traditional check that you're used to today. But again, we're handling the printing of the check, stuffing of the envelope so that your AP team doesn't have to. And then to round that out, as far as the reconciliation goes, there is a check number from your accounting system or from Sage being tied to each payment that you're sending through the network. So remember, you can always refer back to your accounting system with that check number as well as the individual dollar amount, which makes reconciliation a breeze. We've already talked about kind of that flow of the funds, but again, just to reiterate, it's moving from your issuing bank account to that trust account, and that's when we're beginning to reach out to suppliers to see how they want to be paid. Now I'm going to focus here for just a second because our network, like Jim spoke about, is really the power behind this process. We have a network of over 500,000 suppliers and vendors that we already have relationships with today. We're already paying, and that just makes adoption of this process that much smoother and that much easier. Now, for any vendors that are already in that network, we know how they want to be paid. Great. We will send that payment out in their preferred payment method. And then for anyone that's not currently in the network, we'll just simply reach out to them and ask them which one of those three payment methods they would like to receive that we offer. And to wrap up the timeline, because I know that's a lot of information, so sometimes we lose sight of just how quickly this is happening. On day one, as long as we receive that payment file with the payments you're ready for us to execute on by 3 p.m. Eastern, payments are going to be matched against that global supplier database to see who's in network and who we need to reach out to. And then that funding for each payment is debited from the issuing bank account and transferred into the trust account. And those steps are taken so that on day two, we can successfully start to make those payments through whatever payment conduit they have elected, whether that be the virtual card, we create those numbers, the Avid Pay checks are cut and mailed, and those direct deposit funds are initiated so they can be available on day three along with the remittance. Now I'm going to go ahead and hop into our portal for 1 second. All right, so here you see the Avid Pay Portal. Now I've already logged in with my secure credentials, but essentially once you log in, you'll have access to this main batches screen where it would present all the batches that have been sent to the network, who created them, the total dollar amount, and even the status of that current batch. Once I click on my batch, I'm able to see the individual payment and payment details for each of the payments included in my file. So these 3 payments came from the same bank account, my Bank of America account. They have the check number from Sage tied to them, as well as the vendor and payment information that you can see here. Now the status column is important because that's something we're updating on a nightly basis from the AvidXchange side. Remember, once you send those payments over to us, we are doing the debit that same day. And so they're essentially clearing off your account. And we then take on the burden of following up on any outstanding payments, updating the status. You can see in this case, this Avid Pay check payment has cleared. So I can go ahead and view an additional layer of information here as far as the invoice that was included in that payment, the dollar amount. I can even have access to my proof of payment details, which in this case would be a cleared check image front and back that I can download or print. We also offer proof of payment documents for both of our e-payment options, so the virtual card and the direct deposit. Since this one is cleared, I'm able to view those additional details. I can even view the history of the payment. There are multiple invoice numbers included in this payment, and I have my access to my proof of payment doc as well in case I need that. Now remember, I mentioned that optional pay control step. So if you do have pay control set up, over on the approvals tab is where a user would log in either through a smartphone, tablet, or their desktop and be able to view that top level payment information to make sure that anything going out the door has their stamp of approval first. They can drill down to those same details, the invoice information, any description or reference field passing from the accounting system, and decide either on a one by one basis or as a batch if they want to approve or hold that payment. Once they approve it, that's when that payment process is going to kick in, like we spoke about a little bit earlier. All the workflows are easily set up within the portal, and you can also complete searches within the portal as well. Now I'm going to jump back to our presentation for just a moment. And I just want to mention here that any supporting documents related, and I think Mike even touched on this as well, but those checks and invoices will be in TymberScan in the supporting documents tab. So really useful that you're able to access that information right from TymberScan as well. And then I want to finish by just mentioning our invoice acquire, invoice intake process. Now I know Mike went through kind of that front end invoice receiving and workflow approval process through TymberScan. And just know that a lot of our customers we work with today really do enjoy, giving up that AP and data entry piece of it. So whether you choose to go down the route of letting TymberScan handle that, AvidXchange can also intake those invoices through either email, setting up a PO box, so taking them through physical paper mail, or direct upload. We receive that invoice, capture all of the header detail off the invoice, and then push it through into a portal attached to your organization so that your team members can review and send those invoices over to TymberScan to kickstart that workflow approval process. So it's kind of tagging on what Mike already talked about, but it is one option to add on to the services as well. And lastly, I won't go through all of these individually in the instance of time. I know we're down to our last few minutes here, but I do just want to reiterate with Create a Check and Avid Pay, you know, a lot of the benefits with printing on blank check stock, it's cheaper. Pre-printed check stock is essentially 3 times more expensive than blank check stock. And obviously the security aspect of it, so not having those pre-printed checks lying around, you'll just have the blank stock. And then also being able to print from different bank accounts is essentially as easy as a drop-down menu rather than having to switch the paper out. And then I didn't really mention Positive Pay, but with all the checks going out from Create a Check and the Avid Pay network, Positive Pay will be tied to them. So the chance for check fraud is essentially eliminated with Positive Pay. And then really being able to increase control and have that full visibility into your process 24/7 and having easy reconciliation behind the scenes. So, you know, I just want to end on this note, letting you know that there are a lot of benefits to rounding out the process of TymberScan workflow and approval with these payment benefits.